broke this, that doesn't permit to see and to understand that the subject or the social actors are very big variety of these actors, and there are movements, new movements that appears in our countries that we had to recognize as important. I always say that this was not a movement, but it's interesting to know that in Uruguay, the first measure against neoliberalism to stop the advancing of neoliberalism was a referendum, and those who did the activity of the referendum, visiting house by house, were the people that were jubilados. How you call jubilados, Michael? People that finished work. You are retired. No? Who in the left has analyzed as a subject of an important transformation the retired people, for example? No? Well, and who understood that women were in the first line of resistance against dictatorship in our countries? I don't know, they say that here also. Well, we have to open our mind to all these subjects, and also to internet and the organization of the youth, because, you know, one of the ways of resisting repression of the police in Latin America has been using the cellular to convoke rapid meetings, to go ahead the circle of the police that impede to go to the palace of the president. Well, youth has invented ways, and there were couples that went like that with the cellular, but they joined, they passed and they joined inside after the blockade. No? So we have to see that all the things are, and I say, is the youth, if the youth is so skeptical of politicians in our countries, or was so skeptical, doesn't mean that the youth is like in another world. No. If you convoke them to other things that they understand as important, they come. And really, there have been important youth movements because they discover different ways of convoking. One of the other problems that we had, but I think I have said, is we tended in the past to homogenize, you say, the actors and the message. We had one message. We didn't care that people were different. One thing that we have understood is that the respect of difference is fundamental. The new societies, socialism of the 21st century, the collectivism of ancient society, socialism, we reject it. It's not Marx. They say, Marx and the collectivism. But Marx says the contrary. Marx, you know, the criticism of Marx to the bourgeois laws or bourgeois judicial system is because Marx says that the law in capitalism or in bourgeois ideology search equality, no, for everybody when people are unequal. And I could tell you an example. If you measure the payment of the work of a peasant by quantity of sacos, how you say, potatoes, well, the peasant comes with 10, what does this mean that?
Sacos.
Sacos, but in English, sacks. Well, 10 sacks. And another peasant comes with 5. They pay 10 to this one and 5 to this one. Equal. But is it equal? Because this that did the 10 sacks has muscles. He has been well footed in his youth, so he can do a work and take this. And the other is in that moment ill. He is weak. He hasn't in his infance, in his youth, has sufficient food, no? So it's just to pay the effort. They effort themselves equal, but they are not paid equal. No? So this is to think about. Marx thought that you have to give to people in accordance with their needs, and everyone should give to the society in accordance with their possibilities. It's not easy, I always say, and it's one of the big problems of socialism, how to motivate to work, trying to respect this, giving to everybody what he needs. It's not a solution. There are many experiences, good or bad, in the communes in China, in Vietnam, and in Brazil, peasant movement also, they have done things, but it's not the possibility of discussing this here. It's only the idea of how important it is for our new conception of policy, the respect of difference. And this is something that I think that has been given to the left by the women movement, the feminists. I took it from the comandantes guerrilleros of El Salvador. But after I knew that was the influence of the leader, the feminine commanders in the movement, in the guerrillas, that has changed the mind of the men there. And I assimilate the maturity of those comandantes, and after I knew that they were influenced by these ideas, respect of difference and democracy. This is another fundamental thing that is a quality that we need to be able to construct anything, any articulation of all these people that are affected by the system. People, and especially social movements and social actors, are each more sensible to be heard and to permit them to have decisions. We are not able to do policy now, convoking masses and saying, are you ready to? And all the hands up, as it was in the past. Now the people want to be here and have the initiatives and discuss the initiatives and take solutions, resolve things, but hearing. This is a new style of doing policy that is very important. And, well, I think that I will read this part because I think it's very important, because in this situation of so many weakness and overcoming the weakness, there is a necessity of creating a new, I would say, new or renovate political instrument. But I believe it's necessary to caution that in spite of the many deviations and errors that have been made, we must not throw everything overboard and start from scratch. There is a marked tendency, particularly in youth, to destructively criticize everything under the sun, and to believe that you can build something perfect, provided you start from zero, quite completely ignoring the past. We often think that we can create the organization, the party, the society we dream of without recognizing the efforts already made by many other generations who want to do things, who started to work, who have made mistakes, who overcame them and who gave their lives. Some of them, they gave their lives for that idea. I believe it is essential to know all this and to learn from these efforts. If we lose our memory of the past, do not learn from our defeats, leave our own traditions of struggle behind, we are playing the game of the right. Who is particularly interested in having historical memory erased from our people? Because this is the best way of ensuring the non-accumulation of forces and to return to the pitfall of previous mistakes. In order of the party left, and I say that I distinguish party left and social left, because sometimes the people of the parties of the left thinks that they are the only left in the society. And there are much more, and after you want, we can discuss about what is the left. In order that the party left can approach to the social left, the movements, for the emergence of a synthesis, the party left must renew itself ideologically, change its political culture and method of working. The party left must incorporate into the arsenals of form of struggle and resistance what the social left is creating. We are not thinking that only the party left has weakness. Also, the social movements, what we are calling the social lefts, are contaminated by authoritarianism. Many times leaders of the movement are not democratic. Now, for example, the indigenous leaders in Ecuador, well, that always have consulted the bases, the communities, the indigenous communities are not consulting them. So this is not only a criticism of the political left, but also could be criticism about the social left. So I think we have to go to create new forms of political expression. Could be recovered some things of the past. I say recently that not all can be begun with zero. We have to see what we have, but we have to renew, really, to be able to answer, to have answers to the crisis, the objective conditions that are created. And we, in Latin America, we had all these problems, and we have arrived to a new area or new period where hope is in the horizon. We are people that are optimists of the future, because really neoliberalism has created the conditions of this social movement, of this conscientization of people that permit us to elect this leftist government. But during the period of darkness that was especially 90s, 80s and 90s, but in the 90s, we began to have these different practices. So it was not all dark. We began to do steps in the new culture of the left, in the new way of seeing participation of the people. And this has been inherited by our governments. Our governments cannot be possible if this maturation is mature of the left. That we have a more mature left and a much mature people, because it's really the people that has voted. In Latin America, the people voted always, the more poor people voted for the right. But in a moment it was neoliberalism offering solution, and people seeing that the solution didn't come, that even the more poor people has the possibility of seeing that it was not the discourse of the right, but this other possibility that they have to vote. And it's important because you know that Chilean sociologist says that the telenovelas. I always forget the name in English. Yeah. Is the opium del pueblo de hoy. Is the opium of the people of today. Because in the very poor houses in Latin America, you have a TV. You have no money to eat, but you have a TV. And all the people are there seeing how the poor person becomes a rich person in these novels, in these soap operas. So even we have that, the contrast between the solution that the neoliberal propose and the life of the people creates the possibility of what I say a critical distanciamiento, a critical separation from the message of the media. Because the media could do many things, but if you have a reality that is very contrasted with the message of the media, and if you have political practice coherent with the alternative society that we want to construct, people began to see. And that's what happened in Porto Alegre, in this experience of participatory budget. The media were against, but the people were democratically convoked to go to the meetings. And they saw a government, non-corrupt, transparent, that says, this is the money we have, you can control it, and that convoked to participate. So the media could say anything they want. People lived another thing, and that's why they had the possibility of seeing the difference. No? I think that this is something that could help us, because sometimes we argue so much about the media as a power that we cross our hands and we don't do nothing. And in Latin America has been demonstrated that we can do something about the media, but we have, first of all, be coherent, because if a mayor is a corrupted mayor, never could do anything. No? I think that in this moment of crisis, and this is what our candidates has done, Chavez win the elections not fighting against neoliberalism. It was another situation in Venezuela, was the crisis of all the system, especially the political system. People it was very corrupted, so he win with the flag, you say, or the slogan of fight against corruption and new constitution to change this terrible political way of doing in Venezuela. No? But after him, it was in '98, began to change, then he understood that he couldn't resolve the problem of the poor people in Venezuela with human capitalism, third way of Blair in England. And he began, because of the practices, it was not because he was reading text, he was seeing that oligarchy in Venezuela didn't permit to do any changes, and also the system, the state, didn't permit to give health to the poor people, to give education. So he began to see what Michael says, that an alternative society should be constructed, and he named it Socialism of the 21st Century. So this government has won because they have offered a platform to go out of the measures of neoliberalism. Many of them, for example, Correa, was an unknown economist 1.5 years before being president. How people knew Correa? Because he was the Minister of Finance in the government before, and he decided to attack IMF and to attack the contracts of petrol that were not just contracts for the nation. No? And people loved that, because from the 90s, this was in 2005 or something like that, 3, 4. In the 90s, the indigenous movement has been the most important movement against privatization of neoliberalism. No? So they have these fights, he inherited these fights, but in that moment the indigenous movement was very weakened because of the traitor of Lucio Gutierrez, but he comes as